Hi, team.
Hi.
So today we're going to talk about what are inclusive educational practices. So when we think about inclusion, what things come to mind? What do you think about when you think about inclusion?
Well, I think of special education students joining us in our classrooms.
Okay.
I think about how we always want to include our friends in games at the playground.
Yeah, that's
Right?
a big one. That's a big one.
Have to make sure we're ready to do that.
That's a big one. I like that. So whenever we talk about an inclusive education, we're talking about educating all students in age-appropriate general education classes. And you're all highly qualified teachers. So that means that we would be bringing our self-contained friends into our general education classrooms and offering them interventions and support just like we would with all of our students so that they can all be successful. Inclusion, and you'll find this out, isn't just about learners with special needs. It embraces diversity and learner differences, and it promotes equal opportunities for all learners. So when I think about that, what that means to me is that not only do our self-contained friends, not only do they benefit, but our general education friends, they benefit as well. They're able to see people with differences and learn how to interact in a positive way. So inclusive schools are collaborative, we're respectful of each other. And one of the things that is a misconception is sometimes our self-contained friends are presumed to maybe not be competent in some areas. And so that's a misconception that we're finding that a lot of people have. So we're going to presume all students to be competent so that they can develop positive social relationships with their peers and so that they can be fully participating members of the entire school community. So this is a really important picture to me. So I call this is the progression of inclusive practices. So whenever you look at your classroom, do you see where your classroom fits in on this? Because when I sat in quiet reflection, I decided that my classroom looked like this. So I had all of my general education students, and then I had my resource, my self-contained students kind of in one area. And I thought, well, that's a really good idea because then I can work with all of them together. Mm-hmm. But come to find out, that wasn't near a good idea as maybe what I thought it would be. So this is the model that we're working towards right now. We're working towards having those students just mixed in, just like any other student. So why do we want to include students? Research tells us that when children with and without disabilities are included, they learn more. So here are a couple of visuals that we can read, and while you're looking at them, it's important to know that there isn't self-contained in high school. So whenever our students in 8th grade with us and they go to high school, their peers don't know how to interact with them and they don't know how to interact with their peers. Sometimes the teachers are not comfortable knowing how to interact socially or discipline them. And so what happens is when we don't have peer relationships, when we don't have those friendships that we all make when we're in high school, the dropout rate for students that are in a self-contained classroom, I think the number is like 83%. So like 83% of self-contained students drop out. And where do they go?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know where they go. But I don't believe they're able to get jobs. I don't believe they're able to. So I think that society benefits when we just include everyone. Okay. So what does inclusion lead to? Lower rates of suspension. So ladies, let's pretend like you three are in high school right now. Would you want to do anything to get suspended and not be with each other?
No.
The answer is no. You're going to do whatever it takes to remain at school with your friends. With your friends. So, what else? Lower rates of dropout. You're not dropping out of school
No.
because you want to be with your friends.
Yes.
And higher rates of employment, and I think we talked about that a minute ago. So these are just societal benefits. When we all work, we want a working society. We don't want people that don't work. I feel like I meet those people when I'm at a stop sign.
Yeah.
What we didn't
Nice.
realize. So this is the big misconception for teachers. We have our Common Core standards, and they're hard, and we receive binders 3 inches thick at the beginning of the year with our Common Core standards, especially just like you ladies do. You teach reading, math, science, social studies. There's a writing piece. There's so much that goes on to what you do. And in order for a student to be in a self-contained classroom, they have to be 3 or more grade levels below. So we are not asking you to bring these students up so that they can master curriculum like your general education students do. What we really want for them is to just be exposed, to just have the exposure that all students would have. So they're not expected necessarily to keep up, but we just want for them to be able to learn and to problem solve, and just to learn also how to be in a classroom, or just how to be a friend. If my friend drops a pencil, I'm going to help them with it. So just social cues that they probably aren't receiving when they're all self-contained with one another. Oh, before we get to this one, what are some misconceptions that you have? Whenever I say we're going to put a self-contained student in your classroom, what do you think about when I say that? And this is a trusting room. It's okay to be honest. What do you feel whenever we talk about misconceptions? Because I know I had a lot. Go ahead.
I think disruptive. Maybe there's going to be some behavior problems, but also medical problems, like if there's a physical disability. I think those are worrying to me because I'm not medically trained, or I wouldn't know what steps to take with that.
Right, so what I'm hearing you say is that there's a fear that they might have some kind of medical barrier or some kind of something, and you wouldn't know what to do. Kind of like if a student had maybe an allergy and they carried an EpiPen, or you were expected to keep it with you. I don't know how to use an EpiPen, so now I feel anxious and nervous about that. Do you have any misconceptions?
I
Yeah.
would say, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I would say another one is just that maybe it's going to create a lot more work for me, trying to make sure that they always have the tools that they need to be learning and partaking in our classroom environment, because they might need those extra supports. So it might be more work for me to always have to create those things, or always be working with them and not be able to get to my other students.
Yeah, that's exactly how I felt too. I felt like I was going to be like a hamster in a little wheel, or chasing my tail all day long. Like I wouldn't be able to get to anyone because I would just be with this one student. And maybe the minute I left, who knows what would happen. Did you have any misconceptions?
Well, those were my 2 biggest ones, but then even just keeping the consistency in the classroom, and if are they in all day, are they coming and going, and are they gonna be there every day for a certain amount of time, and just making sure that those routines are still in place.
So these are all valid and they're good points, and I hear your concerns. So included students will pose some classroom management problems. So we heard that one. I mean, it's a waste of time, right? They're not going to be able to go and do these things, so why? Why do I need to spend time? It seems like a waste. The general ed students, they get cheated when the teacher is just with this one student. It seems unfair to the rest. And I don't have enough room in my class as it is. I mean, we're to the brim as it is, and now we're going to add more students. I don't even know what to do at this point. And general education students, they're not going to accept a student with a learning disability. They're probably going to bully. So these are all misconceptions that we have all had, and they're valid, and I value your opinion. So I went around to some teachers and I asked for them to share in their testimony. So this is a picture of a student, of two students, and they were able to do the work that the general education students would do. And the teacher told me that they didn't need much modification. They came in and they were eager and they were able to do the same work that the other students were doing. So this is actually an example of one of the self-contained students. This is an example of their work. And here's another example. And you can see that not only did they use some kind of scientific tool, I'm not sure what it was because it's the high school science teacher, but they were also able to label. So that was a really big one. And then it looks like these are examples of his regular, his general education students. So they're not nearly as detailed. So that tells me that his misconception that students wouldn't be able to do the same kind of work, it was busted. So here is another example of a teacher. These are work samples, and she wanted to see if you could pick who was the self-contained, who was her student, who would be the self-contained student. Do you guys know? Do you guys know? I'm going to give you just a second to think about that. Who do you think would be that teacher?
Well, it looks like that one's got a sentence. And this one's got a sentence and that one's got a sentence, right? But that's on right now and that one's. So maybe that one.
So who did you think it was?
I think we kind of agreed on the top right.
Top right.
I thought that's what I thought too. Whenever she showed me this, when I was putting this together, I was like, oh, Erin, okay. And
That was it?
That's the self-contained.
Wow.
so here's all of the writing that we're really gonna hone in on. I thought it would be that one. And it was that one. Isn't that amazing?
Wow.
And that was a complete sentence.
And it's that's right, it's a
There's
complete
even a period
sentence.
at the end and a
It-
capital letter.
That's right, and it says, I like windy weather, and she was able to illustrate. And if you'll notice, she's, trying to write in the lines, she's trying to make, her letters just the way that they should. And this student, it's kind of all over the place, and this one is not bad at all. I can't read this one, I have no idea. I just knew that it was that one. But that was my misconception, that self-contained students are gonna come to us and they're not gonna know what we're doing. But what I have found is they will rise to the occasion. So another teacher, she shared this with me, that when we first talked about having self-contained students, that she felt anxiety and that she felt fear. And she discovered that once her students came to her, she felt like she could just breathe. And what kind of fear and anxiety are you having whenever we say you're going to get, you're going to be getting a student? It almost sounds silly because whenever we think about it, they're just students. They're just students. So I'll tell a personal story. Whenever I get a phone call telling me I have a new student on their way down, I'm full of anxiety. And I'm wondering, okay, what's about to happen? Are they going to be able to fit in with the students? Or what are they bringing with them? What habits are they bringing with them? So that's how I feel just with general education students. So whenever I knew that I was going to be getting a self-contained student, I too felt that anxiety. How are you guys feeling right now that we've kind of talked about it for a minute?
I'm a little anxious about it. I just don't, I want to make sure that I'm able to give them things that they will feel successful in, but then you said 3 or more grade levels below, so how do I take my content and make it accessible at that level?
That's a great question. Are you currently modifying your work for your resource students?
Yes, yeah.
Mhm. And that's what I've done. Whatever I'm doing for my resource student, that's exactly what I do for my self-contained. So let's take a math, for instance. If we're subtracting 3-digit numbers, 300 and bless you. Oh, bless you again. Oh, bless you for coming. Thank you. So if we're subtracting like 312 from 148, my general ed students, they might be doing that for their morning work. They're expected to do that for about 20 minutes. Well, my shared students that I have, my self-contained students, so instead of doing that math, instead they just have to identify the number 8. And they go through the problem, they go through the whole worksheet, and they don't subtract and they don't add. But their ability level at that moment is just, can you find the number 8? And they just circle all of the 8s. And then when they're done, the next step is to put a triangle over all of the 5s. Because that's a part of what they need for real life, is being able to follow multi-step directions. So I have some that can follow one direction, and I have some that can follow 2 directions. So why don't you talk just for a minute and tell me what other fears or anxieties do you have that I can help you with? I'll step out and let you talk.
Testing.
Oh, yeah, testing.
Are we responsible for testing them? And is there a collaboration with their, with the self-contained teacher to assist us on work